In today's video, we're going to be taking a deep dive look into the upcoming pattern as well as our very interesting tropical cyclone that we have been tracking, now looking more likely than ever to develop as models have continued to trend further and further west. Now expecting this storm to enter into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, risking impacts to Florida. States like Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, as well as Texas, should still pay attention. This storm has already trended so far west. Who knows if it'll happen again? But right now, they do show it crossing over Florida and actually redeveloping off the southeast. So we'll be seeing a lot of interesting things. And if you're on the East Coast or the Gulf Coast, there is potential impacts. And the East Coast, I mean, this could look even worse than it originally did, even though it's going into the Gulf for now. You'll see why in a minute, and we're going to just take a look at it. But if you don't live along the coast, again, we will be diving into the upcoming pattern as a whole as well. So definitely some valuable information here as well. Now, let's just dive into things, and we're looking at this afternoon time frame. And interestingly enough, we do see storms across the Caribbean here. This is our area to watch right now, and it is expected to kind of just move through these areas. There is chances of it developing over even the next 2 days. So we're seeing that chance in the short range starting to come up as well. We will look at the Storm Prediction Center outlook at the end of this video, of course. We also see that there is a lot of thunderstorm activity, especially across the Midwest here from Minnesota down through Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, and even as far southward as Kentucky and Tennessee here. We do see that along the eastern states, there's overall a risk of thunderstorms. There's always kind of a chance, so no big surprise here. During this time of year, we do start to get those daily thunderstorm chances on the rise. So definitely no massive surprises here. As we keep going, though, towards August 2nd here on Friday, what we end up seeing is a lot of these thunderstorms up and down this whole eastern corridor for the Ohio Valley, the East Coast from Florida to Maine, and even up into Canada as well. We're seeing plenty of chances of thunderstorms. So just a whole lot of activity south of the Bahamas and even in the Bahamas. So Cuba, Bahamas, kind of far south of Jamaica. We are seeing a lot of thunderstorm development in here, and this is our current tropical cyclone. So this is definitely the area to watch, as it isn't developed yet by this point, but we are beginning to see the signs of that initial development getting going. This obviously has to start as some thunderstorms, and that's how it usually does, and we see that progress further and further and further. Now that's again for Friday, tomorrow on August 2nd. Let's just move forward towards Saturday, August 3rd here. And what we see is just plenty of thunderstorms up and down the East Coast, getting worse and worse daily. So Saturday's looking even more intense than Thursday or Friday. And definitely more widespread chances of these thunderstorms to develop. Now, we see that our main area of tropical concern is continuing to trek further and further eastward, now somewhere between South Florida, western Cuba, and even south of Cuba. This is all going to kind of come together over the coming days. Sunday here on August 4th, we're continuing to see thunderstorm chances up and down the eastern seaboard here from Florida to Maine. So definitely a multi-day event there. Most of your tropical concern is located somewhere here between Cuba and the west coast of Florida now, along that Gulf Coast. Nothing really developing too big time yet on the European model. It is one of the more underwhelming models for this beginning portion of the storm. But we do see that as we cross from Sunday into Monday timeframe, this is when things really start to get interesting here over eastern Georgia and northeastern Florida. We do see this tropical low beginning to try to form near that coastline of, again, Georgia and northeastern Florida. There is a lot of warm waters here in the southeast, and it looks like this one is going to try to cross out over open water through time. We do see that the Rockies in general are having quite a bit of thunderstorm and showery activity in there, as well as the kind of northern plains and upper Midwest, and even into the northeast. So even though we have this tropical development, I don't want to ignore the other major impacts happening around the nation, of course. As we just cross in towards Tuesday on August 6th, we see that it doesn't get its act together too quickly. We see that a lot of this low pressure is off the southeast coast here. We have a lot of moisture to work with. As you can see, there's a very wide area of thunderstorms happening within this kind of broad low pressure region. and that is going to aid in developing a storm eventually. We do see that there is still continued showers and thunderstorms along that Rocky Mountain range, which again has been kind of ongoing here. And then from the Great Lakes into the Northeast, we're continuing to see thunderstorms prevailing for a lot of those areas. For Wednesday here on August 7th, we finally have a more organized low. 1003, nothing too intense yet, but definitely that is a storm. Montana through the plains, we are seeing continued thunderstorms and showers in this area. Let's just take it further towards Thursday, August 8th. And this is when things are getting really interesting. Thursday, August 8th, we see a 999 millibar low pressure center here south of South Carolina, or kind of east and south. It's kind of in the middle there. And it is continuing to slowly move northward. Again, all the while sitting over these very, very warm waters. Also, look at how wide the impacts are. We're seeing banding impacting states like South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia from this storm. So we see kind of a organized low look. It looks a lot more intense here than the low pressure is letting on. You would expect to see a much lower pressure in a storm that has that kind of a structure, but it's still a little weak by this point. Friday as well, 1002, not really getting its act together. This European model has been holding this storm back for so long now. Very, very interesting to see, especially while over open waters. And then by Saturday, we see it kind of like re-enter over South Carolina once again. So it just really hovers around this area for days and somehow doesn't develop. Typically, when we see these storms kind of slow down like that, they start to rapidly intensify. So I think there's a lot of options on the table. And if we did see a slowdown like this, I would consider that to be bad news as far as how strong this storm could get. I definitely think that would aid in its development down the road, unfortunately. On this model, fortunately, we do see it strikes as just a 1005 millibar low pressure center here along that South Carolina coast, potentially bringing whole lots of rain in here, but doesn't really ever develop into a very, very major storm on this particular model. As we move on towards the GFS model, I want to show you a very different solution. It looks similar to start, but we see it actually develop off that west coast of Florida, which is much more in line with what the National Hurricane Center is showing, by the way. So we see an actual developed system here off the west coast of Florida, 1003, all the way down to a 996 there, north of Tampa Bay area, 995 as well, before striking somewhere between that kind of panhandle area and the west coast area. I call it the armpit of Florida right there. Let's take a look, since we're primarily on this model just looking at the storm here. Let's just take a look here at the southeast view, just so we get a better idea. Again, right in the kind of panhandle of Florida, or better yet, the armpit of Florida is what I was calling it. We see it kind of move through this northern Florida, southern Georgia area, bringing whole lots of rainfall through there before kind of re-entering off the southeast. So again, just like yesterday, but different this time around, we see this storm end up right here the same way that the European model showed. So the European model is very different, but they both end up here off the coast of South Carolina somehow in different ways. So it was the same story for different locations yesterday, where the storm took different paths to get to where it got, but they both got to the same place yesterday as well. As we keep going, this is as we're reaching Tuesday the 6th here. It's very close to that South Carolina coast. We see it as a 991 there on Tuesday, August 6th. Here's Wednesday, August 7th. And it is a 978 millibar low pressure center south of North Carolina there. This time, instead of striking that southern coast or that South Carolina coast, we actually see it continuing northward on this model towards North Carolina. Very, very bad news there. It continues to develop into a stronger and stronger storm. Hovering in those 970s is kind of a bad sign. That's a very strong low pressure system. And it does strike that southern North Carolina area before riding along the Outer Banks and impacting Southeast Virginia as well, and then slowly moving offshore. Just out of curiosity, the total precipitation here would be out of control. As you can see, reds would be about an inch, 2, 3 maybe. Browns would be 5 to 10 inches, which we see a pure band of that where the storm tracks. So that would be impacting everywhere that the storm hits directly. And then even along that South Carolina coast and southern North Carolina coast, we see areas of 10 to 15, even 15 to 20 inches there in the magentas. So absolutely bombed with precipitation here for some of these areas, as this very slow tropical cyclone tracks up the coast. You don't want a slow one, you want a fast moving one so it can just get in and get out. If it's going to hit, you don't want it to stick around long, but on this model it does. It just hangs out way longer than it's welcomed to, and doesn't really want to just, it doesn't want to leave. So I know a lot of people like that are like this storm. Is kind of why I started to chuckle. Anyway, as we move on to the AI model here, I guess we'll move more towards the southeast view as well here, just because most of the action happens in this portion as well. So this is your European AI model, which we've been using a lot, and we see it take a path similarly to the GFS model, not the European model, which is interesting. And we see it strike that armpit of Florida here as well, a little bit further west, but it does hit within, I would say, 20 to 50 miles of where we saw the GFS model hit. Let's see what it does over the next couple of days. It crosses over Florida and southern Georgia, and it's off the southeast again here, as you can see, just like that GFS model. Before, look at this, approaching North Carolina. A little bit of a weaker low here. We see 980s instead of 970s. Still would be a very impactful system. I want to take us towards more of a view where we'll be able to see what's going on here. Let's see. Maybe we'll do southeast, just like we did on the... Man, that is not very helpful. All right, well, let's see. Let's see if I can get a better view here. I kind of get messed up with these all the time. I'm trying to get like a zoomed in look, but I just can't find it here. They don't have the states on this one, so I guess we'll have to do this. It's on the very southern side of things, but nevertheless, it strikes kind of that Outer Banks area once again here as a mid-980s storm, likely bringing a whole lot of precipitation on this one as well. And this one rides a lot closer there to New England and the Mid-Atlantic, so maybe some extra impacts in here as opposed to our previous GFS model. But interesting to see this one siding with the GFS model and not the European model, since it's based on the European model. It just has AI implemented into it. Definitely a lot of models siding with the GFS model, which, remember, is the first model that showed this storm heading into the Gulf in the first place. The European model has been day over day over day showing it off the East Coast, and now it's finally folded to what the GFS model has shown, but it's kind of lagging still on the back end of the storm. So we'll see which one ends up being right in the long range, of course, but it is interesting that the GFS model so far has been right most of the time. Now I'm going to take us back to the southeast view here, just so that we can see the whole path. But again, the reds is a couple of inches, browns being 5 to 10, and we see that for the whole path of this portion of the storm as well. So pretty similar to the GFS model, a little lower on the amounts, but we're seeing a whole lot of potential rainfall if this does occur along the southeast coast, unfortunately. Now, the European model's total rainfall doesn't really look that different. So let me just actually real quickly, I know we're going a little off script here. I'm going to take us to the southeast view here as well. There and then there. So look at this GFS model, European AI model, and then European model. So even though we have a very large discrepancy in how intense this storm gets, there's not a very big difference in the amount of precipitation that we see, actually. Even this European model calling for 5 to 10 inches in the browns, which we're seeing for a lot of coastal Georgia, coastal South Carolina, coastal North Carolina, even southeastern Virginia there. And then we're seeing, again, 10 to 15 here in these blues along the South Carolina and North Carolina coast, and then magentas here for the South Carolina coast, indicating potentially 15 inches plus. Take that with a grain of salt, because that would be mind-boggling amounts of rainfall, obviously, but in these tropical situations, we do sometimes see something like that. Now, outside of this storm, we really don't see a whole lot unless you're in the northern plains, kind of upper Midwest, Great Lakes, or the Northeast. But a lot of your western and southern areas are seeing a whole lot more drier conditions outside of this potential tropical cyclone. Very, very interesting stuff. Now, no surprise that the precipitation anomalies are pretty high for the southeast here. Greens being about anything to about 2 inches above average over the next 15 days. Blues are 2 to 5 inches above average over the next 15 days. And this is according to the European ensemble model. So even the ensemble model is definitely picking up on this for the eastern areas. And now we actually have a little bit of spaghetti model guidance. This is none of the models that we've looked at yet. We only have a handful here. In just about a day or two, we are going to see probably 20 to 50 models on this spaghetti model chart. But we only have about 5 right now showing up, and all of them enter it into the Gulf to some extent in this area here. So very interesting. But again, Texas, Louisiana, even you need to look out, and Mississippi, Alabama. Some of these models are showing a further west impact. Not that that's the most likely outcome at all, but it is a possible outcome. So we can't really rule out anything yet. Now, we also have intensity guidance, and we have two models that take us kind of towards tropical storm status before kind of faltering off a little bit there. But a majority of our models here take us straight into category 1 and even category 2 status over the next week or so. So this could end up being a hurricane, could even be approaching major hurricane. That cannot be ruled out, especially if it lags off the southeast coast like we've seen a couple of these models show. That would definitely increase the amount of time this storm sits over favorable conditions, which would lead me to believe a more developed solution could be possible at its peak. Now, European ensemble models probability, no surprise here, 90 to 100% chance from Haiti all the way to western Florida. It is looking very certain that we're going to be seeing at least a tropical depression here. Interestingly enough, this model only has us at about a 40, or that's even a 30 to 40% chance of tropical storm status. So definitely on the lower side, I would say, for the hurricane status or the tropical storm status. However, definitely something to track. We probably have a couple of these models not even showing it enter off the southeast. That could be kind of divoting the data, if you will. But definitely something that we're going to be tracking. Now, to look at the National Hurricane Center outlook, we have a code red. So now we have the highest color rating, at least probability for a tropical development. And we see that they have a 70% chance over the next 7 days, 30 over the next 48 hours. So definitely a pretty decent shot that we see this one within the next 2 to 3 days. If not afterwards, it's looking highly likely that we see this one develop at some point. So we're going to be watching this closely, as we have been for probably over a week now. Be sure to subscribe, as we do upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload, so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.